In the heart of the digital metropolis, one name shines brighter than the rest. Deploying over 22 billion emails and counting, generating more than 600 million in online revenue. Introducing the titan of email tactics and the pioneer in the digital domain, the visionary behind Rosedale Digital, George Adamidis. Hold on to your seats as we journey into the mind of the gold standard in digital marketing. Let's get into it. Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Articulate This. This week, I bring on George Adamidis from Rosedale Digital. How's it going, George?
Pretty good. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful to have you. So can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got started in digital marketing?
Sure. So way back last millennium, when I finished school, I needed a job. And the first place that hired me was an email marketing company. Now, that said, I did graduate with a business degree, and I've always enjoyed advertising. And I felt like digital marketing, even though I wasn't planning on having a career in digital marketing, it melts the two things that were most important and interesting to me, and that's data and design with data.
Mm-hmm.
I think I said that twice. But just the merging of the two things, because traditionally in marketing, it was always just, spray and pray and hope people react to it. But with digital, you have really great insights and really concrete reporting that can show you which way to take your messaging, because people are responding and you're getting that instant feedback in the metrics.
I will say that working with you in the past, you were one of the, I would say, early adopters. You've always been that person that's been data-driven, data-led, and you always brought this to the conversation. So it does show, it showed in your work, even when I was working with you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, like I said, you can't argue with numbers. I mean, you can choose different metrics to look at, but numbers are numbers, and there's no bias necessarily in those numbers. So that's why I've always been a big proponent of it.
Awesome. So what inspired you to start Rosedale Digital?
Unemployment. So I tried consulting in 2009, 2010, and failed miserably. Did it for 2-3 years. Got a job with what is now Salesforce. Worked there, quit, joined a client as the VP of CRM. And when that business went belly up, I was sort of looking around and saying, well, what do I do now? And I actually had old customers from Salesforce contact me and say, hey, do you know anyone who can help us with this? And I put my hand up and said, I could do it. And it basically just snowballed from there. I had 1 or 2 clients that, paid me reasonably well. I thought my wife would tell me, too bad, so sad. You tried consulting, it didn't work. And we just had a baby. But she said, go for it. And it just blossomed from there. So that was almost 7 years ago now.
Wow. So what does a typical day look like for you now?
Yeah, typical day. So come into the office, meet with the team. We do daily stand-ups, plan out what we're working on for the day. I do a little bit of the development work, but I try to keep my hands out of it. I'm mostly busy with client concerns, client strategy, client escalations, helping the team because they are a little bit more junior, just knowing the ropes and helping them along with their client activities. So it's a little bit of everything because we're a smaller shop, so wear a lot of hats.
So you kind of segued perfectly into my next question, which was going to talk about like the challenges you face of an owner of a digital agency, and and then how do you balance work-life balance?
Yeah, so definitely work-life balance is something to be mindful of. But on the flip side, just the work side of it, we're a smaller shop. All of our clients are referrals. We don't have like this big sales organization, so it's a little bit more difficult to go out there and find new business. And because we're a smaller shop and we work with enterprise clients, sometimes there's a hesitation to go with a smaller shop because, what happens if you get hit by a bus? What happens if your systems go down? We're not a big consulting firm with 500 staff. So that's also been a challenge as you try to break in and provide consulting services to companies that use the software, the marketing software we support. From a work-life balance perspective, it can get really, really tough. I've had moments where my wife says, I think I have a roommate because I'm just so busy. And so, it's constant communication with the people at home and the people you work with. The one good thing about being a business owner is that if I have to run out to pick up the kids or run an errand, I'm able to do that, which has been very satisfying. One of the things I often tell people is that I probably could make more money working somewhere else, but I wouldn't have the same flexibility to sort of manage my day and the work-life balance as you mentioned. So it's not easy, but it's something that you constantly work at. And, like any business, there's ebbs and flows. And so when there's an ebb, I definitely take that time to spend it at home and maximize that as best as I can.
You mentioned earlier about, it's challenging as a smaller shop to kind of get the acceptance of an enterprise. How have you kind of broken those barriers? How have you passed that line to say, hey, they give you a shot?
Yeah, that's a good one. So, I mean, as I said, most of our work is referral based, and I think when the referral comes in, you're already 70% of the way to getting them as a client because they've reached out to people and they've presented you as an option. But I have had situations where they start asking questions such as, where's your server backups? Where are your all these questions that an enterprise company would have. And I've definitely had pushback. In fact, I did not have business insurance until a large enterprise said, do you have $2 million in coverage? And, as a small shop, you don't really think about that. But when someone brought it up, it's like, okay, I have to go out and buy insurance. And I've been doing it for many years since. But I think it's more about providing examples of the work you've done and giving them some assurances that this is not new territory for you. And often, frankly, our pricing convinces them as well, because we're not one of the larger shops. We don't have layers upon layers for them to pay for as well. So it's a combination of past experience, projecting confidence that we've done this before, and also giving them a bit of I wouldn't say a break on pricing, but a different pricing model than they're used to. I think those are the three things that really help us win the enterprise level business.
Digital is really fast paced. So how do you stay up to date and what do you do to keep sharp?
Yeah. I mean, I'll be honest. I'm really bad at that. The good news is I find most, if not all companies don't do the basics really well. They're always chasing the shiny new object. And, you and I worked together probably 15 years, or maybe less than that, but over a decade ago for sure. Yep. And, people would always say, oh, email's dead. Oh, this is going to get rid of email. And if anything, it seems like we're just adding more layers than taking layers away. And I definitely am not on top of all the different trends in digital marketing. I stay focused on the things that I control in terms of what we work with on our customers. And we do our best to keep abreast of what other people are doing by reading blogs, keeping up to date on just LinkedIn. I know that's not a regimented way to be on top of things, but again, most companies don't do a great job of the basics, and we're the basics plus, and so we're good at endearing ourselves to our customers' client base and giving them what they need to do, just the basic stuff, right? But I hear you. There's lots of stuff out there, and it's important to be on top of it. But this goes back to work-life balance. There's only so many hours in a day to keep on top of these things.
I think because you have always been data centric, and I think data has largely been ignored, even though it's been there. People haven't known how to tie it together. I think that's something you do really well, and you've always been a person to tie the numbers to the shiny new object, or
right.
if it was email. So I think that's power in itself. So I've seen you shine in those areas. But piggybacking off like email, like I remember those conversations when social media came on the scene. Is they said email was dead. Still it's there. It's a cornerstone of the digital marketing landscape. How do you still see it evolving? Where do you see it going in the future?
Email specifically?
Yep.
Yeah. So the one thing I always fall back on is that nobody owns email. someone owns Instagram, someone owns TikTok. They can change the rules at any time. There definitely can be rule changes in email for sure, but everyone has an email address. It's free. It's the first social media platform really out there. You get a job, you need an email address. To sign up for other types of marketing platforms, you need an email address. So I don't think it's ever going to go away. In terms of where it's going, a lot of it is moving toward ultra personalization, and also something that wasn't really feasible until maybe the last 5 years is updating email content and interacting within an email in a live manner. So previously it was, here's my content, I deploy it, let's see how it works. Now there's applications out there that can send 50 versions of that email. And when the numbers reach a certain statistical significance, that's going to be my creative for every email that I just sent out. That to me is far more powerful, and it allows you to do testing in a more quick way, more quickly. And then the interacting within the email itself, perfect example. I have my boarding pass in an email and my gate changes. Next time I open the email, it's going to show me my new gate. That's the kind of user experience boost that really makes people rely on email more, which is, I'm not getting a PDF file that is static. Now I can open up my email and get live updates to that email, which is very powerful.
So with all these changes, all these things that are happening in email, and it's funny because it's been many moons since I was specifically on my day-to-day with email, but I still see it in my day-to-day, and the basics I still see are not understood or missed. Can you give any tips for optimizing for email deliverability to make sure that your emails actually get to someone's inbox?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Deliverability in the past was usually a reflection of content. There would be filters on content that would check to see, your spamminess score, so to speak. A lot of that's gone away. A lot of it really now is based on the reputation of your IP. Your IP is the address that you're using to send from. Think of it as like your outbound phone number. And basically what happens is the different ISPs will evaluate how well people are engaging with your content. Do they just delete it? Are they marking it as spam? Are they opening it? Are they clicking on it? They take all that in aggregate across all the different people receiving the email from that marketer, and then decide, a lot of people are opening and clicking on this. It must be legitimate. Let's deliver this to the inbox. Or, a lot of people are getting this, they're deleting it. No one's even opening it. It's probably spam. And so knowing that that's how ISPs measure the success of your emails, you need to strive for that, hitting those numbers, hitting those targets. So always be personalized, always put dynamic content where possible, and always make the email something that requires a click. Now, people talk about friction. You want to be as frictionless as possible in online, and I don't disagree with that. But when it comes to email, you need people to engage and actually take action on that email to ensure that it's going to be delivered in the inbox moving forward. So that to me is the most important thing. Don't send email because you think it's important. Send email because your customers thinks it's important. And then when they engage with it, that's just going to naturally result in better deliverability and inbox placement.
Well, you kind of already answered my next question. I was going to talk about, the strategy for measuring success in emails, but I think you kind of summed it up there, the engagement of it, what people are doing, clickable content, things of that nature.
Yeah, but I'll add to that because at September 2021, Apple changed the way they manage their iOS. So since the advent of iOS 15, any email sent to someone using an iOS device is automatically marked as an open. And they do that for privacy control so that you can't say, oh, this person opened it, this person did it. They basically say everybody opened it. So open rate as a measurement for success is less impactful than it is today than it was 3 years ago. Because as I said, we're seeing 40% of devices are an Apple device or more. And so those are all being marked as an open. So it's important to get people to click. I mentioned earlier, it has to have something to click through on. That's one of the reasons. So just to go back on, what do you do to measure it? you can't use open rate anymore. It's not reliable. You have to use clicks. I mean, obviously revenue and anything downstream from there, but opens is less reliable.
So with all these changes with privacy, and like even if a person consents, you won't. How would you know? Are they totally wiping out the ability to read the engagement of an email right now?
If you're on an iOS device, yes, because everyone's going to be marked as an open, and so they do that again because they want to hide whether someone opens something or not. They can't stop the measurement, so instead of stopping it, they're making everyone provide that feedback that it was opened. Some platforms will let you see what device someone is using, which will obviously impact how much you can rely on an open rate. But I feel like that's a lot of extra work when you should probably just focus on clicks.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah.
Any concern that they may even go a step further and wipe out all sort of engagement with the email, so even the click you won't even get to see anymore, or they'll say that everyone clicked?
So there are times where we'll see some of the Chinese domains where every link was clicked in an email, like every link. So that removes, and it won't be everyone at that domain. It'll be like a handful, but you take a look and like, oh, who clicked on this email? And you see many people at the same domain clicking. So I don't know if that's bot behavior to artificially inflate a click through, or if that's behavior on that domain to do just what you've expressed, which is hide the fact that they actually clicked on it. Now, when you use a enterprise level platform, all the URLs are encoded to the individual. So even though you and I might receive the same email and it goes to the same landing page, your link will be different than my link.
So
knowing that, sorry, I was going to say, knowing that you can't really fake your click versus my click. Like if you click, it's your click. Like there's no way to fake it that I did it.
Makes sense. So where I was trying to think when you were speaking, it was calculated in my head how this would work in a new world where this is going. How does this? You mentioned earlier about you're optimizing the email kind of in real time based on the engagement. Now, the metrics, I guess I'll say superficial. It's probably not the right term, but the superficial metrics that we were used to in the early days of opens and clicks, are they now being more powered by actual conversion rates in the back, or like how are you combating that? How do you stay ahead to say what is the most efficient or best email to send?
Yeah. So it depends what your purpose is for the email. So using selling stuff as the measurement, it's very easy to figure out an ROI from an email campaign if you're using Google Analytics, for example, because it's tied uniquely to that campaign. And every message that you send out would be its own campaign if that's how you created it. Point being, it's easy to see downstream what the source was that brought someone to the website. Once they're on the website, you as a website owner own that entire experience. And that's not something that outside providers can impact. When someone gets to your site, they're on your site. So it's not, we definitely look at overall like revenue if you're selling stuff, but if it's something like, which sometimes you're not selling something, so you want to know which drove the most visits to a website. But again, that can be done through your Google Analytics tracking, which is where did these people come from? Because that probably plays into that earlier point on everyone clicking. It's probably not going to do that because that impacts systems downstream as well. Whereas an open is still unique to the individual on their device. They're not hitting another website per se. So I don't know that would change. So I went a roundabout way there. How do you check with all the open rates being impacted? It's going to be clicks. It's going to be revenue.
Makes sense. Let's pivot a little bit on Salesforce. You mentioned, working with Salesforce. I believe you service clients with Salesforce today in your agency. So how do you incorporate these strategies from Salesforce with you? Like how does today's engagement work? I would imagine because ExactTarget was the company that was acquired by Salesforce.
Yeah,
it's part of their suite now. So like, walk me through a typical kind of how you engage your clients with Salesforce.
Yep. So it depends on the client because sometimes clients will have Salesforce CRM, sometimes they do not. It is not a requirement to have Salesforce CRM to work with Rosedale Digital. However, all of our clients do use their marketing platform. For clients that have both, we integrate the two platforms. And integration, a lot of companies say they integrate, and often it's just API calls between two platforms. This is a little bit different in that it's out of the box integration, but in the back end, it's just APIs talking to each other. So typical client has their source data in CRM. If a client does have a CRM, we strongly support that is the database of record. You always want your database of record to be your CRM platform, not necessarily your marketing platform. The data from the CRM will synchronize with Marketing Cloud so that within the Marketing Cloud, the email platform, you have access to all of the same data that is in the CRM. You can create lists from that. You can pull content if there's content stored in the CRM. Any data that supports your marketing efforts in the email channel. The data then synchronizes between the two platforms, but I can't change someone's, let's say, first name in the marketing platform and have that update the CRM. The CRM is the database of record, but if we deployed an email, that email deployment will go up into the CRM record. So as a customer support agent, I can log in and say, hey, Pat received this email yesterday that he's calling me about. I can see he actually did receive it and that he clicked on this link. So if you were to call in with a support question and say, hey, I got this email the other day and this happened, they can validate that directly in the CRM without having to leave the platform. That is a really big win for a lot of customers. But more so, it's really just not from a support perspective, but just generally speaking, to see all the different emails someone has received in their CRM record, because that allows people to create reports or campaigns based on not only the CRM data, but also the marketing data that came up from the Marketing Cloud.
So along the lines of Salesforce, how do you approach the customization and configuration of Salesforce? I've seen many people have the software, and even in an enterprise, if you have divisions, they kind of do their own thing. There's no normalization or standard. So how do you navigate that? How do you support that?
So usually our work in CRM is somewhat limited, just to be perfectly blunt about it. We've done a couple implementations. The most important thing in any CRM, specifically Salesforce, is the architecture, the underlying data architecture. If that's not done correct from the start, it causes a lot of problems downstream. You really need to have a fantastic architect who has experience in creating the types of databases that are required for not only your business operations, but also your marketing operations. You need to ensure that that's done correctly, because that is, that's the starting point. And if you start in the wrong spot, everything cascades from there and makes it more difficult to get it back to where you want it to be. So the customization, we always want to ask, starting at the end, what are your goals? What data will support those goals? And then how do we surface that data to the user so that they're able to use it to the best that they can? The one thing with CRM, and I'm sure it's common with other platforms, is that the entire thing is customizable. There's only a handful of standard, items or objects. And as you mentioned, different groups can do different things in there, but it's important to have a blueprint. So for everything we build, we have a blueprint. Super important that clients sign off on it and get their understanding back to you so that everyone's on the same page with what needs to be built and how. And getting that sign off from the customer. It's a bit of a cover your butt scenario, but also it's just eliminates any confusion, because here's the document we all agree to that we're going to build. Here's the output. We customize the platform based on this document. Do you sign off or not? And having the document really as the guide through those customizations and the end product is really what makes everyone work better and more aligned to what that end product should look like.
It reinforces what you said earlier about the basics. If you don't cover the basics, it makes it 10 times harder. And by doing the basics, you put your right foot forward.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. So it's important to start off on the right foot, and then when you do build from that base, having everything documented so everyone can look back and pick up the pieces should things crash. And then, that goes back to my earlier comment on being a smaller firm and some larger clients saying, well, what happens if, George, if you get hit by a bus? Well, now we've got all this documentation to fall back on. And, everyone should be comfortable knowing that things are working and how to anyone could pick up these documents. And if they know how the platforms operate, understand how your specific business operates within it.
Awesome. So next question, it may seem like I'm kissing up, but I'm not. This is like a genuine thing. I've known you for, many years now. I've learned account management from you. You kind of set the gold standard for me and how to do it. Just learning from you, your speed of responsiveness, utilization of data, like some cornerstones in digital that to this day I still see those roles do not do. So, how, can you share some of your philosophy, best practices with managing clients? Because I think you are the gold standard in that respect.
Thank you for that. Yeah, listen, I think clients always liked working with me, regardless of where I am, because I don't necessarily sugarcoat. I think a lot of people sometimes want to avoid being accountable for a mistake. And I think you need to be accountable for the things you do, good and bad. And there's a few things that people always want for good account management. It's good communication and timeliness. So if we have an issue, we report it immediately. We own up to our mistakes. And I know this sounds like a lot of the negative stuff, but this is how you really earn the trust of your clients. It's not only, enjoying the successes and the wins, but also being upfront and honest about the challenges that you're facing. On top of presenting the challenges, is also presenting possible solutions. And I think that's where people really can appreciate working with a professional in any industry. It's here's the stone cold truth of where we're at. Here's where we need to go. And here are the 3 or 4 ways we can get there. And let's discuss what those options are. I'm not one to try and dance around the issue or try and lay blame somewhere else. If it's your issue, you need to own up to it. On the data side, I think it's important to use data to tell a story to your customers. It's not only, hey, that was great, but it was great because this performed X% better than the last time, and really getting the objective data behind the successes and the failures that you have. And because that allows the customer to then take that internally, and they'll be armed with all the data they need to tell the story that they need to tell internally. So again, it's be accountable, provide timely communication, and also provide solutions when you're talking about problems, and then finally use your data to support your cause or to support what you're trying to communicate. Those are, I think, the 4 most important things.
Cool. So we talked about disruption from the very beginning. We've seen it every so often, and it's becoming rapidly. So many new technologies from AI, blockchain, all these shiny new tools keep coming up and evolving. Out of all these emerging technologies that are on the landscape, is there any that kind of excites you, where you see the potential where it's going? Is there anything where you see that that could impact, that if businesses were to use it now, it could have a positive impact? So what are your thoughts? What do you see on that?
So I mean, AI is it's taking over. Everybody is talking about it. And I do see the benefits of it. I've actually seen people using AI in the world that we do, writing copy, even writing code. I think it's still in the very early stages. People understand, I think, the power of it, but don't really know how to execute against what that available power is. One of the hardest things in email, and I mentioned it earlier, you want to be as personalized and dynamic as possible and relevant to the recipient as possible. The hardest part of that often is, what am I going to show them? Like, if I could have 100 different slices of audiences, but then I need to create 100 different versions of creative, that can be very difficult. And I think that's where AI can really help support marketers. Is we know we need to be more relevant. We know we need to have more personalization, but there's a bottleneck in creating the content to support that personalization. So I think AI is a great way to bridge that gap. So instead of hiring 10 creatives that are just churning things out and, are doing so for the sake of speed, not the sake for creativity, why not have an AI tool do that on your behalf? Because it allows us to add that personalization, be more relevant to our recipients. And then if there's a cost associated, and there is, we can measure the lift and say, hey, you know what? We paid this AI platform $1,000 a month, but it increased our revenue $6,000, whatever that number is, and say, wow, that's an impactful change. Or maybe it's, hey, it cost us $1,000. We only got another $300. So maybe we're not ready for this kind of thing yet. But that, because it's fast, because it's fairly inexpensive, that's a great opportunity to leverage this tool, provide greater relevance to the people that you're speaking to. So I think AI really is the new shiny tool that might actually have an impact on it. The one thing I think about with like social media, it's like, oh, now Facebook's dead, Instagram's doing better because of some changes, and there's TikTok, and it's like you end up just it ends up being like TV channels where you're just running the same commercial on different channels, right? And so that's, to me, you get a lot of repetitiveness in social media, especially if you're following the same people on multiple platforms.
I like the example you gave when you talked about email, saying that no one owns email, and it's kind of for everyone. So it could weather every storm that comes. I could always switch my email address. How people communicate, there's a standard for it. That technology evolves. So versus the flashiness of one platform to the other, email seems to be it seems to outlast everything.
Steady Eddie.
Yeah, it's there. It's because I was gonna ask you, like, do you see a world without email? I don't know. I don't know if that's even, it's so ingrained to what we do. I'm not even sure how far ahead we would have that would have to happen.
Yeah. That's a tough question, because there was a time where there was no email, and now we're saying, how could there not be email, right?
Yeah.
We're very myopic in our own time, not really knowing where things are going. But there could be a world without email. There could be a world where everyone has a virtual assistant, AI powered, that can manage all the messages. So instead of sending email to a Gmail inbox, it sends it to your personal assistant, who then determines if this is something meaningful or not for you. It's certainly possible, right? I'm thinking for myself, a perfect example. I want to buy a canoe. I search canoes, and all of a sudden I'm getting canoe ads all over the place, right? Like, that's something that people are used to now. But wouldn't it be great if there was like an AI component where, hey, I scoured the internet for canoes, and this is what you should do based on what I know about you as my virtual owner. I don't know what you want to call it. But that could be the same for email. Hey, I got 1,000 emails in my inbox today. Hey, let's get my virtual assistant to tell me what's up. So it's email, but not email. So who knows? It could happen.
I think back to the early days when it was such a big deal to do an A/B test and then determine sending the winning subject line a few days later based on that data. Now we're talking about like multiple hundreds data sets calculated almost instantly to determine that. So it's fascinating how it's evolved and where AI has been there, because in the old days it was just, it's basic code, if this then that, to get the result, and then you determine where it goes. So it's been fascinating to see the evolution of that, and it naturally comes into it just evolved like in a click. So it's pretty.
Yeah. I mean, 2005 is the first time I heard of multivariate testing. And that was always the holy grail of marketing tests, but it was very hard to execute. And to your point, in the last year or two, now that's kind of automated. That entire multivariate testing protocol has been automated by one or two vendors out there. And it's extremely powerful, but it's also extremely expensive right now. So yeah, we're getting there. We're getting to a point where, and I think this is where AI can really play a big role into it is, and I think it speaks to what I mentioned earlier. Hey, I want to try 60 different versions of this email, trying these 5 different things out in each one. Creating it and measuring it is difficult. But if you can have a tool through AI create the content as well as the tests, that sort of goes away. So I wouldn't be surprised if in 3, 4, 5 years, we've got a platform where I just punch in, I want to sell this jacket, go do it for me. And the AI figures out, email and banners and tests everything out and tests it across all these different platforms. Uh, I'm sure that day is coming. And I should say, I know there's programs out there that do this in a more analog way by tagging every page that you ever communicate on and checking the measurements there, but it's very difficult to implement at this point. So yeah, we'll get there. A/B testing was like pop a bottle of champagne moment,
Yeah.
15, 20 years ago. And now I don't have to do any of it. Now everything's going to be done for me through a virtual AI assistant. So it's pretty wild how fast things can change.
I remember trying to, I guess, I'm not sure sell, but try talking with clients about multivariate testing and trying to explain it to them. Back then, it was a professional services engagement that required, a whole team of people, and then you would have to go through this whole big production. And like you said, now it's software, click of a button, put some assets, and it'll do it for you. That's extremely powerful. Seeing where it's come from to where it is, where it's potentially going to go, it's pretty a wow factor.
Yeah, and listen, that's the nature of any technology. Just like building a car. People used to go to the car, and then Henry Ford invented the conveyor belt and the production line. And now it's people are bolting wheels onto a chassis that's got a battery on it. So just like any technology, it's going to continue to advance and be easier to use. And all these complex things that require 20 people to manually do are just done automatically in the background. It's a pretty wild time to be alive.
It's amazing. There's been so many references to manufacturing that, manufacturing has been 100 plus years, and taking what they learn on the digital side it's been amazing to see, because some things I listened to another podcast where we were talking about usability and customer experience, and they were talking about, in Zendesk, or I forget the name of the company that they referenced, but they said, and they revolutionized call centers and how they ticketing. I'm like, well, that kind of existed before. It's just that they opened up something that is more like software based. So it's interesting how things evolve, and based on they've taken an old idea, made it new again, just like, email came from writing letters of a piece of paper to electronically sending it, and it's like, wow, the new thing. So it's interesting.
Yeah, it's constant evolution. And I think that's what keeps it interesting, frankly. I remember first graduating from school and visiting customers, and I'd meet people who've been doing the same job for 15 years, and I'd say, God, how do you do that?
Yeah.
But I sort of get it now. I get it in two ways. One, they were parents and they just want to get home to their kids. I get that now that I'm a parent. But two, it's if there's enough change and evolution in the things that you're doing, you can do the same thing for a long time, because it's enough change that keeps it interesting, at least for me. And I think that goes back to some people will try their hands at entrepreneurship and some people won't. It's just, do you want to or not? And I think it's the same thing with any job. It's, do I want to do the same thing for a long time or not? For me, I always want to be engaged and interested. And there's been so much change over the years. There's still that thin line of continuity. We're still sending email, still not saving lives, but all the tools and features and functionality is what really makes things really, really insightful, really engaging. And so that thankfully I fell into a good industry to fall into back in 1999.
Well, George, thank you so much for joining me today. Where can people get in touch with you and connect with you?
Yeah, certainly at our website, rosedaledigital.com, or on LinkedIn. I don't really do the socials too much, so I'll keep it to that.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. I really appreciate the time. All the details that George mentioned are down below, and thank you again.
Thank you. Had a great time. Anytime. Thanks, Pat.